Murray, talk to me about NC State. Now, we talked about it a little bit here. This is the NC State team that looked good against Louisville after looking, I'm not going to say looking bad, but being upset the week before against Miami. This is an NC State team we're trying to figure out. Explain to me how this NC State team goes from an embarrassing loss to Miami, not score-wise, but just an embarrassing loss to a team that I think they should have won, to looking pretty damn good against Louisville. What happened in that week between that got them to change their mindset?
Yeah, the one thing I'll say about NC State in their 2 losses so far, and this is not an excuse or anything along those lines, but it's just a fact. In that Mississippi State loss, they lost Peyton Wilson, who was kind of seen as the preseason, potential ACC Player of the Year and a first-team All-ACC linebacker. They lost him. They had to reshuffle the defense on the fly, and they gave up a lot of big plays as a result. Miami game, they lost a guy in Isaiah Moore in the second quarter, who was seen as, kind of the midseason ACC Defensive Player of the Year, possibly. So they had to reshuffle the defense, give up, that final play especially was one of the biggest issues where they gave up a pass across the middle to a tight end. Linebackers don't know their assignments, miss the assignment completely, and that ends up leading to a loss against Miami. They've reshuffled things again, moved a guy that was playing outside linebacker to middle linebacker in Drake Thomas. He responded this past week with 15 tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, and 2 sacks against Louisville, and really kept Malik Cunningham at bay. And that was something that NC State really, really needed in that game. That's their hope against Jordan Travis again this week, is to be able to do something very similar, to be able to limit him and play well against the pass. And then that way you make this team, you force this team to have to pass the ball if you're able to bottle them up in terms of the running game.
The Wolfpack have been an injured team. You talk about, there's been several different guys, some with Florida State ties, former Florida State players who are done for the season. Well, how does this happen? Like, what do you attribute to those? I mean, is it just is there something in the way that the practices are going? Or is it just the tough play right now of the circle of suck in the ACC?
I don't really know, to be honest with you. I mean, when I look, are you talking about the injuries, or are you talking about just the
injuries? Yeah, just injuries in general. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, I got you. I mean, for NC State, I mean, some of them there hasn't been a ton of injuries. It just so happens to be that, for some reason, they're all to critical players. I mean, like I said, Peyton Wilson was a guy that was seen before the season as one of the best defensive players in the ACC. Cyrus Fagan was, as you mentioned, a transfer from Florida State to NC State. Didn't get the start in the first game, starts in the second game. He has a season-ending injury in that one. And then, now this past week, 2 weeks ago, Isaiah Moore, one of the, he was named the, kind of called the heartbeat of the team or the entire defense. He's lost now for the season. I mean, guys like that, you just can't afford to lose. So, if it's a second string guy and you've got your, he's a depth piece, it's one thing. But you're losing, I mean, NC State and several teams across the ACC. I mean, we've seen it with Clemson, particularly. We've seen it obviously with several programs that, we're planning on contending outside of Wake, which has been one of the luckier teams when it comes to injury so far this season. So when you lose players like that, especially in game, it reshuffles things, and it can sometimes lead to losses like we saw at Miami.
Absolutely. Now, on the offensive side of the ball, we talked about this earlier, Devin Leary. I mean, there's a decent argument. He's either the best player in the ACC or number 2. He's up there in the top 2 players right now, top 2 quarterbacks right now in the ACC. What has been his key to success? And Mark, you said his numbers are 21-2, 21 touchdowns, 2 interceptions right now. That's amazing through 8 games. What has been his key to success so far the first 8 games of the season?
Well, I mean, as you can imagine, it's being safe with the ball. It's not making bad decisions, which does help. But, he also has, I mean, I will say this, it's a combination of a lot of things. But, Dave Doran said the other day, the key to his success is really is not changing, like being the same guy on a consistent basis. He said, guys like Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, everybody talks about how they just become these like superhuman guys in the fourth quarter. And it's not really that. It's just the fact that they don't change while other people around them do. Like, they just stay solid and continue to do their thing and continue to be successful late in those games. But another thing I'll say too is he has some wide receivers, guys like Devin Carter, who, dropped a pretty big pass against Miami, but for the most part has been a reliable receiver. And a guy like Emeka Emezi, two guys that are over 6'3", very strong wide receivers that he can throw it up in the air. And for the most part, they can, if they don't make the catch, they can contend with the DBs that are going up against them. And they're able to limit them too. So, if that way you don't give up an interception, you don't have those types of fluky plays. So he's played really, really well, and he trusts everybody around him to be able to make plays. And he's just a very, very smart quarterback. He's got a big arm that he can, he can throw down the field. But a lot of times he ends up using the guys that he has, the big, strong wide receivers that he has to be able to make those plays.
Is there any concern? Final question for me. Is there any concern? Obviously, we've talked about this. Florida State's having a down year, well, a down half decade pretty much. Is there any concern? NC State comes in as a favorite in this game. Is there any concern of a possible letdown against a team that on paper NC State should come out victorious against? Because this is a Florida State team that has talent, but at times has been able to put together against North Carolina, put together against Syracuse, wasn't able to finish the job against Clemson like you guys were able to do. Is there any concern that you guys could have a hiccup against Florida State this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always that concern when you're facing a team that, like you said, has a lot of talent, has a lot of athleticism. Teams from Florida just have a ton of speed. I mean, Florida State, one of the things that they've done better this year than Miami is being able to tackle. And Miami actually tackled really well against NC State in that game. And one of the big reasons for that is because they were able to load up the box. They were able to compete with NC State. And NC State was trying to go to these short passes, trying to be able to get the ball down the field. And they weren't able to do it because they weren't able to get the ball down the field. They weren't able to run the ball into Miami. So they're going to have to be able to do that against Florida State this weekend. And we'll see exactly, what they're able to do. If they're able to contend with that talent, they're able to contend with that speed that Florida State has. I think that's going to end up paying dividends for NC State. So, the big thing for them is being able to get out to an early lead, being able to, get stuff going early on, which is not something they've been able to do the last few weeks, and take some of that pressure off the defense. And so that way they can play a little bit more all out compared to what they've had to do the last few weeks.
I apologize for saying that Phillip Rivers was overrated. I still do think he was overrated, but I apologize. You're a good guy, Corey, so I apologize to you and Wolfpack Nation. I stand by my statement, but I apologize for saying that.
Before Jason said that, I was going to say, I know this is probably going a little bit before Corey's time, but you better settle a debate for us because we had to start to go back and forth on Phillip Rivers, both at the collegiate and the NFL level.
He was in my time at FSU as a student, so he talked a lot of smack. Didn't win the ACC. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
And it wasn't necessarily because of, I'll say it wasn't always because of him. And the reason why I say that is because here's where the issue was for Phillip Rivers and for NC State as a whole is because of Phillip Rivers, because of the offensive success they had, and some of the success they had overall, they were able to recruit really well defensively. And all of those defensive players, guys like Manny Lawson, guys like Mario Williams, Stephen Tulloch that came from Florida, a lot of different guys they had come in, all came in those later classes. So they had the number one defense in the country that was, Manny Diaz happened to be on that staff after Phillip Rivers left. But when Phillip Rivers was there, they did not have a ton of defensive success. So he was having to throw the ball all over the yard.
Phillip Rivers, his last year at NC State, brought his North Carolina State team to Columbus and played the defending national champions.
Yeah.
And a team that would finish in the top 5 in the country that year, the following year there in 2003, and took them to the wire in overtime, 44-38.
Went to a double overtime against Florida State. So, yes. No. He was a good quarterback. He was fun.
Last thing I got for you, Corey. We kind of touched on this the other day because, again, with NC State, we're looking at a program that's not lining it up every year thinking, hey, we're going to go to a college football playoff type deal. It's cyclical. It's okay. Where's the development of this roster? Where do we stand? What's the schedule look like? Because of Clemson being down this year, because of it being right where it is at this point in the season, and everything's right there to play for. Is this fan base going to think like something got away if they're not able to close it out this year and get to the conference championship game?
Yeah. I mean, I think so, because again, like we've said, I mean, you don't get many years where Clemson is down. I mean, this is, the Florida State of old. Like, you think back to the 90s, like if Florida State was ever down, all of a sudden everybody else is like, oh, we have a shot. I mean, you think back to the 2000s. I mean, in the early 2010s, I mean, we were talking about, all of these things about, that Florida State team at the time. Jimbo Fisher, when he first initially got there, it was like, all right, nobody's going to contend with this team. And then the rise of Clemson. So for NC State, these opportunities, and for Wake, I mean, I'll say this about Wake Forest too, like, these opportunities are few and far between to be able to win, this side of the division, not even just the ACC as a whole, because you have to get to the ACC championship game to be able to win it. And not many teams have been beating Clemson over the years. So, it's you have to be perfect. I mean, they have to be able to win these games. And, for NC State, that's one thing they haven't been able to do over the years. They haven't been able to win the winnable games, to be able to get to that point. And then, a lot of times when they get into those situations, like they'll have at Wake Forest in 2 weeks, if they beat Florida State, obviously they have to get through that one first. But, going into that game against Wake Forest in 2 weeks from now, if they're not able to win that game, yeah, it's going to be looked as a letdown of a season, because they had that opportunity to get there and they missed it yet again. So
NC State Wake Forest is going to be for the ACC Atlantic title.
Weird, man. It's weird.
God,
I love it. Corey, one last thing.
Yes,
I know
sir.
I said one last thing. Do you take up for the ACC? Are you a conference guy? Do you want the conference to do well? Do you root for the other teams during bowl play? All of that?
No. I mean, look, I'll say this, maybe during bowl play, but I mean, I think this isn't the SEC where, everybody's just all SEC versus the world. Like, the ACC is just like, no, we're out for ourselves. We all want to win. There's certain teams that if you see guys move around from other conferences and things like that, you'll root for those types of guys, those types of individuals, those coaches that you like. And Mike Norvell happens to be a coach that I actually do like. I mean, in talking to him in the past, he seemed like a really level-headed dude. He's had his issues over the last year and a half, but it's not something where you have to think like, oh, he can't rebound from this. He can never recover from this, because he's bringing in the talent. If he's able to sign the top 10 class that he has right now, then yeah, I think he has a good shot to be able to turn things around. But yeah, I mean, I don't think you're ever going to catch an NC State fan that's going to say, oh yeah, I'm here rooting for UNC, or I'm here rooting for Syracuse, because of, there's just, it's not really that. And nobody's rooting for Clemson.
Right.
Clemson winning either.
Corey, I think will agree with me on this one. We are both actively rooting for Clemson to lose every single week. I'm actively rooting for Miami to lose every single week. I don't mind if NC State, we joke about it. You asked who would I want, Mark? And I said Wake Forest. I would not mind if NC State won the Atlantic. I really wouldn't. But I want Clemson to go 0-12. I want Miami to go 0-12. I don't give a damn if they're in our conference. I want pain. I want suffering in Coral Gables and in South Carolina. Pain.